Welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. I'm the producer, Caleb Keith, and I'm joined by our hosts, Doctors Rod Rosenblatt, Scott Keith, and Adam Francisco. Follow these great minds as they answer pressing questions about theology, history, and apologetics. This show is brought to you by 1517 The Legacy Project, serving to proclaim the gospel to all people, especially those broken by the church. Welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. I'm producer Caleb, and today I'm joined by Drs. Keith and Drs. Rosenblatt, as well as a very special guest, Dr. Jim Nestingen.
Hello, Jim.
Nice to see you guys.
Good to see you in California.
Joy to be here. Thanks.
So today is a particularly special episode. We've had guests on before, but we're recording live for the first time. We have guests sitting around the table, and we're at a bar, so you'll definitely probably hear the Olympics on in the background, probably some chips being snacked on, stuff like that. Definitely an informal episode. Most of the episodes are pretty informal, but this one's particularly fun, so just keep that in mind. I know some listeners like to know what background noise it is, and it's just going to be crazy this episode.
No Zippos lighting pipes today, though.
Unfortunately, still have whiskey out.
My ice is melted, though. You can't hear the chink chink.
Oh, yeah. So we have guests on today, but before we hop right into the show, just want to talk about a couple things regarding the website. So you can visit thinkingfellows.com, and there we have show notes for every episode, so don't forget to go there. From there, you can subscribe to the show via your favorite podcasting apps or iTunes. You can also sign up for a newsletter. The newsletter, if you've signed up and you're wondering where that is, hasn't gone live completely yet. We're still working on the back-end details of making that get the new episode to you every week. And so once that goes live, you'll see an email with the new Thinking Fellows episode every Friday. So you can go check it out there. And don't forget to, if you listen to us on iTunes, or even if you don't listen to us on iTunes, go ahead and open the iTunes app on your phone or on your computer and go drop us a rating. 5 stars is really appreciated.
It's like when you buy a car and your car salesman hands you the little review and he says, really, 5 stars is the only option.
It really is. It really is. I can, as a past car salesman, I can attest that is the truth. Your job relies on that. So please fill out the form. 5 stars, though, always appreciated. And if you've been listening to Thinking Fellows the past couple weeks, you'll have noticed we've transitioned from doing kind of our Lochi topics to a ton of guests. And that has to do with the way we record. We don't record every week and then air the episode. We record in advance so that we can get as many people as possible. And in order to do that, there's some costs associated with that. You know, there's flights, there's hotels, there's food, there's drink, and all that. And we, as always, need listener help. So if you go to the website, thinkingfellows.com, at the very top there, you'll see a donate button. And if you can drop any amount in there, that always helps. It helps us get guests. It helps us maintain the show. It helps us improve the website. Whatever you can afford is super appreciated. We have a couple regular donators now who
we are very thankful for.
We are extremely thankful for. People who are donating $20 every month. This is a free show, and they've made it a paid show for themselves. And for that, we are extremely grateful. And we're grateful to any new donations that we get in. As always, if you have any questions or want to contact us in any way, there is a contact button up at the website where you can send an email directly to my inbox, and then I'll delegate it to specific fellows as necessary. So without further ado, I think we'll hop into the episode. And for that, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Keith, because he's the one who facilitated this episode and has a special reason for it.
Which is probably why it's so helter-skelter.
Yeah.
So for me, this is an incredible experience because literally I am sitting around a bar table with the two men who have made the most impact in my life. Dr. Rosenblatt, Dr. Nestingen. I had Dr. Rosenblatt at Concordia University, Irvine for my undergraduate courses, and I took as many courses as I possibly could with him. In fact, I think we created about 5 or 6 courses that didn't exist, many of which were done one-on-one just so that I could take more courses with him. Some of my other what I like to say is that throughout my educational experience, I had many, many different professors. I couldn't even count them all between time at Concordia, some other graduate institutions, and even at Oxford. I had many different professors and lecturers. And it's interesting when you run into different professors that occasionally you run into some that you know right away are different than others. Jim Nestingen I had as my thesis supervisor for my PhD program. He was the final sign-off that I'm ready to go, and helped me and shaped me and guided me along the way as I was studying Melanchthon. And Jim agreed to do this, having met me once for a couple hours at a recording session not so different than this down at Faith Lutheran Capistrano Beach. And as I had you guys together, we've done this 2 years in a row now. We've kind of pledged to make it an annual experience where the three of us will get together over the summer at least one day. This is our second year doing that. Last year was up at Jim's house up in Oregon, and this year down here at the NALC conference. And I started to think, what is the difference? Why have you guys throughout your careers taken different, I guess I'll say guys on, maybe people on, that you've literally made a part of your family? Because, I mean, I say Dad Rod, and I say that very liberally. And I say Jim is my doctor father, and I don't mean that just in terms of reading my thesis. And I know that that's true for many other students in your life. We were talking about one right before the show for Jim that we both know. And there are people at this table that have been changed by you, Rod, and just influenced by you that would too call you Dad Rod. And what is it? Why? I guess I'm asking you to stroke your own egos a little bit, but not really, because I think that there's something substantial here that our listeners would appreciate. We'll get into it a little bit later. I think it has to do with a particular type of love that occurs between, I'd say, men for the most part, but it can occur, across the board too. But you've taken these people on, and you've made them part of your life, and it's really changed our lives. Why? I guess that's a hard question. Is that a hard question or an easy question?
No, not really. The United States in our day is very, very short on fathers. Children don't come with an instruction manual, and so we fall back on what we can. But I happen to have a really, really good dad. So for me, it's like breathing. Certain students are saying in their own way, can I get some extra time with you? Maybe just for questions, fine. But they come out from the pack somehow and say, I think you could be of help to me. And with any father with anything going for him, the answer is, it probably will. Let's do it.
Right.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think myself that teaching is a form of evangelism.
You've told me that before, actually.
Yeah.
Gene Veith said that of me in his blog once, and he said Rod would hate this, but he's an academic evangelist.
Yeah, that's what we are. We rent ahead. We have retentive memories and some passion for discipline, eagerness to study. But of course, the whole purpose of that is to be of service to a particular group of students who we don't choose, but who are assigned to us. And generally, in my experience, when there are some of those students that stick out, you start seeing them, in class, and you can hear their questions, and from their questions that something good is happening there.
Yep.
And when you see that happening, then the most natural thing to do is to encourage it.
Yep.
And so I repeatedly pulled students out of class and told them, you don't have to go to lecture, but you have to spend this whole course studying the question you asked me. And then give them the academic background and the basis for pursuing it. And several dissertations have come out of stuff like that, So that I've had students repeatedly whose PhD dissertations were written on questions that they raised in an introductory church history class. And that we use that question to integrate their whole course of studies undergraduate, and when they went into graduate school, they had a whole bibliography of stuff.
That's wonderful.
It's just, and then you get people that are, I always say that Americans read books like a conquering army. I mean, they get the book and they read it and they put it up on the shelf like a trophy.
Yeah.
It's mounted there like a deer head, and left there with just about the same significance.
Yeah.
Whereas we're dealing with texts that are lifelong.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealing with texts that you can't conquer. And the absolute joy of a teacher is watching a student engage the material and engage when you're dealing with sacred texts.
Yep.
And you watch a student who's getting it and pursuing it and being pursued by it and losing. You watch the self-loss of genuine scholarship. I mean, that's just electric.
Yep.
And when you see that, then it becomes the most natural thing in the world to stick with that student.
Sure. One of the background words that's always in there some way or another is philia. Lewis calls it in the Four Loves friendship, but I think it's even more particular. It's a non-homosexual love between those of the same sex.
Yeah, that's
French would say camaraderie.
Yeah.
And we're losing it at a rapid rate. But if you have students, who's a young man whose father wasn't the strongest in the world or the best in the world or anything, you can sense that he's in real need of it and will work for it with everything he's got in him.
I love that.
Because it's so rare to him and he needs it like oxygen.
Yeah, beautiful.
Jim, you stumbled on something that clicked a memory in me when you said that you'd have a student in class and you'd catch by one of their questions that they really got something. You'd say, you don't have to come to any more of the lectures, but I need you to engage this question for the rest of the semester. There's a freedom in that that I think was definitely unique in my undergrad experience with Rod, and not at all what I expected when doing a PhD dissertation with you, that really appealed to me, right? And that I really ran with, I think, and that it made me engage more than I would have
always
if I was sort of dialed down on in a system. And I think that there's something to that is just incredible. And if our listeners out there are students, I'd say, try like hell if you can in what's left of the American system of higher ed and find
people like that.
Find people like that that'll allow you to explore your interest to the nth degree and not mandate that you just show up because that's what's on the plan.
Yeah. Of course, my colleagues hated it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think his did too.
I had an attendance policy. You never have to attend.
Yeah. I would always say, if I can't draw you here, don't bother.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. Your goal as a teacher is to make your student independent of you.
Yep.
And it starts right at the beginning. In the first things where you free the student from. There are certain students, of course, where paper dolls are a real achievement, where they just can't handle freedom like this.
Right.
But when you got a good student and you got material that or texts that that capture, you can turn the student loose with the text, and the text will be the teacher, and all you have to do is facilitate,
guide, and
it's just fun. And here's one of my favorite examples. I had a student evaluation done. They were doing student evaluations, and one of the students complained that I expected too much. I expected a level of maturity that the students didn't have. I had two students, both of them West Point graduates, and their assignment was to use what they'd learned in their undergraduate degree to learn something further about the Reformation.
Oh.
So these two guys came in with a project. They'd studied military fortification in the Reformation. The Pentagon, as a design for, an enclosure, a stronghold, developed during the Reformation and was part of the whole Reformation. And they had built the Pentagon, and they indicated just how, they did about 15 times as much work as anybody, but they learned something, I learned something. It was just fabulous.
Right.
The material had captured them. They came out of that course with more than I could have ever given them.
Right.
And it was the material that was really freeing them to explore.
Absolutely, and I'll say, this is sort of an editorial note that I think one of the things that's most tragic about the way this current generation has been dealt with educationally is that they've been taught that the plan is the end.
Yeah.
And really, because I teach at the undergraduate level now, and when you try to give that amount of freedom to students that have come up under No Child Left Behind or whatever, it's very hard for them to handle.
Yeah.
Very difficult for them to handle,
Yeah.
to the point where they sometimes even get angry that there's not more detail in the assignment or something. And I think,
won't you let me paint by number?
right.
So the lack of structure is itself what sets them.
Right, what sets them off. And it's interesting because I think there are still those students who, of course there are still those students who engage and get the material, but they're so trained to paint by numbers that even those students have a hard time breaking out of the mold.
It's a form of seduction that a teacher is, practiced in.
Right.
That your job is to give the material to the student in such a way that second level of involvement starts to develop.
And it starts to sing to them at night.
Yeah, when you're dealing with, for instance, one of the Psalms.
Yeah.
Where you yourself have been in that Psalm and you've read that Psalm, and the Psalm has read you, and that Psalm has caught you at night, and when you take a student into a Psalm like that, then the students start seeing that there's more to the Psalm than they've ever seen before. And it captures the imagination, and it starts to pull, Psalm 32, huh? You can't get to the bottom of it.
Right.
That's just gorgeous stuff. Whereas when you read Luther, there are all kinds of things like this where, he's so caught that he starts preaching to the law as though it's the person in the room, or he starts preaching to death, To be sure, O death, you will take me, but Christ will force you to vomit me out.
Yeah.
It's just fabulous.
It's great. Well, we're going to move into our little break, but that's Jim Nestingen always teaching me how to be a better professor. I love it. All right, quick break for advertisement, and then we'll be back.
Welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. We're back at our break. We're still in a bar, as you can hear, and we're with Drs. Rosenblatt and Nestingen, as well as Dr. Keith. And today for our break, we're going to talk about a book. I think Rod hit it really good at the beginning. He said that the problem is a lack of dads today. There's a lack of fathers in the United States. And so we're going to talk about a book very appropriate to that and dedicated to the two men in the room here. So that's Dr. Keith's book, Being Dad, Father as a Picture of God's Grace. And he's going to talk about that a little bit and then maybe bounce it off to Rod and Jim.
I'll say I like it better when Rod talks about it personally. And Being Dad is really, it's an exposition of what I learned from, I'd say, systematically from Rod and organically from Rod, and especially organically from Jim too, just about what it means to be influenced by a father, and how a father who's a gracious, kind, loving father in this world really does point to the fact that we have a gracious, loving father who loves us on account of Christ, and how important it is for children, for people generally, to know that and to see that, and even if they haven't had that that blood relation father in their life, to have somebody in their life who is that father to them, or people, plural, in their life who are those people to them, who point them in a real sort of analogical way to the fact that God really is our gracious and loving Father, and has loved us so much that He's given His only Son to die for us, and to bring us to eternal life with Him, and to freedom, and to be in His presence. So I think that's how I would describe it. I think Rod does it better personally, but that's being dad. We sell it over at shop1517legacy.com.
Yeah, Lewis said that he stole anything that he had that was of value from George MacDonald or from Chesterton. Right. And the one from MacDonald is To My Father. And the culmination of that kind of free verse poem is that you showed me that fatherhood is at the great world's core.
Yep.
By who you were, not necessarily by what you did, but who you were.
Right. That's a chapter heading to one of the chapters in Being Dad, that at the core of the universe is Father.
Fun.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. So that book, at the beginning, if people do pick it up, is dedicated to the two men that I get to sit around this table and have some drinks with and have some questions.
And know beforehand, it's not a how-to book.
No.
It isn't. All the other ones are how-to books. This one is not. But start it, and I'll bet you finish it.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. I just love it. Yeah, cooking.
Cooking. All right, so we were going through this, and I know I've referenced this before on the show, but when I hear you two talk, I cannot help but think of that Bill Moyers interview with Robert Bly, where he goes through the gathering of men.
Yep.
I don't know if you've ever seen it, Jim. Rod and I talk about it quite a bit. So Robert Bly, the American poet, wrote
Minnesota atheist.
Wrote Iron John. Oh, really? That's funny. In the 90s, after writing Iron John, he did this thing called A Gathering of Men. And essentially for what I can tell, what it was is he would go across the country and men would come together, both old men and young men, and he would ask them some pretty simple questions, basically asking them, has a man that's older than you ever influenced your life for the good? If so, could you tell the story? And then he'd ask the older men, have you ever influenced the life of a younger man for the good? And if so, could you tell the story? And on camera, these guys tell these stories, both old men and young men, and as they do it, 99.9% of the time, every single one of them breaks down into tears before they finish the story.
Yeah, sure.
And I think for two reasons. One, because those times were so rare in their life, and two, because those times impacted them so thoroughly and profoundly. Yeah. And as I sit and talk to you two, I realize that we had a discussion about what it means to be a good professor, and that was amazing. But I could be wrong, I guess, but for whatever reason, I've always felt like with the both of you that it was more than that. That when we are together, it's certainly a professor-student relationship, but it's also a friend relationship.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
And you can't be anxious about that. Just go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
don't be anxious about it.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and I've thought a lot about this lately, and I love having you two together to talk about this. And I was actually, because I just wrote a little article on it, I was reading Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics, and right at the beginning, this is book 8 when he's talking about friendship. First paragraph, first section, he says, "For no one would choose to live without friends, even if they possessed all other goods."
Yeah. Lewis's The Four Loves, a chapter on friendship or philia, has those same themes in it.
That's great.
So, and then I think back so we got together last year at your house, and we got together today for lunch, and you guys hadn't seen each other in a year. And you two pick up as though you just had a conversation yesterday. I know that you haven't had a conversation since last year.
No,
it's a mark of friendship. You pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful gift.
No, my My doctor father was Gustav Ingren, and when I would see him, his life after he retired was complicated. He divorced and remarried, and there was a lot of monkey business. But he, when I'd see him, the conversation would pick up the next sentence after the last one that had been spoken.
Wow.
I mean, it was just fabulous. And those conversations went on for years like that with extended interruptions. I love that. That's a mark
Extended
of
interruptions.
that's a mark of real friendship, boy. When you can hold one another in that way,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it keeps going.
And it's not the same as Eros, where you're talking to one another about the relationship itself. Utterly different. And it's wide open. That is, Lewis says of philia, there's always room for somebody to join. Oh,
Right.
are you interested in that too? Come on in.
Right.
Yeah.
It's infinitely
that's really-
expandable.
that's
It's not
fun.
limited to two.
Right.
Right.
At all.
Yeah. It's not defined by jealousy.
Nope.
Yeah. It's
Self-pursuit.
Now he does say there are undercurrents that are dangerous. The particular one is the whole rest of the world is screwed up, but our group is not.
Yeah.
seclusion.
He said it speaks with the voice of a god.
Right.
That's trouble.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
big trouble. That's big trouble.
Yeah. So you're sort of defining by example philia, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Which it's kind of interesting when you read in Aristotle. It's usually translated just as friendship, but we sometimes can just say love of a particular type,
Yep.
and we'll say brotherly love.
Yep. Or
Yeah.
the French would say camaraderie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this in light of the Sixth Commandment. That God gives all of us friends. Marital relationship is different.
Yep.
The difference is that friendship can and does end.
Right.
And it's appropriate at sometimes that friendships end.
Right.
They can last your whole life. Excuse me. They can last your whole life, but and I have friends that I've had for my lifetime, but there are friends where the friendship is over, and you both clearly understand it's not there anymore. The difference between friendship and marriage is in friendship you give yourself in such a way that you can get yourself back again.
Oh yeah.
It can end. But in marriage, you give yourself in such a way that you're irretrievable. You literally belong to the other.
Right.
And I think that says a lot about the freedom of friendship. It's different than marriage in that way that you're freeing the other from yourself, and you enjoy the other, you rejoice in the other, but at the same time you see the other as another.
Well, and
Yes.
Lewis says something similar to that in The Four Loves when he says it's unnecessary.
Yeah, this one we
Yeah.
don't need in the same way
Yeah,
we
yeah,
need
yeah,
others.
yeah, that's
But
great.
then he says it's unnecessary like philosophy and art,
Yeah.
right? Which sort of kind of leads you to believe that he believes it's really necessary.
Yeah,
But, it's not going to make the propagation of the species isn't dependent on
Right.
it.
Good point.
And I think it is freeing, right? To sort of like
Yeah.
appreciating art is freeing, and contemplating philosophy can be freeing, and marriage is different than that. Yeah.
The logic of marriage keeps bringing you deeper and deeper and deeper into the relationship. When it's healthy, it draws you ever closer.
Yeah, is it Lewis that says the picture of lovers is face to face?
Yeah, picture
The
of friends is side by
is
side.
side by side.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Walking, discussing.
Yep.
Yep.
Similar interests.
Yep.
You may not always share those similar interests with your wife. Your wife may not enjoy pipe smoking as much as you do,
No, right, exactly.
but your friend probably does.
She's the enemy of my pipes.
But I think one of the most important things here is that we notice is that we're severely lacking in this.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's
We're
true.
severely lacking in it.
Yeah.
We flip to homosexual immediately, And it doesn't fit with philia.
No.
It does
No,
not. You think of Band of Brothers, and it's far away from homosexual as you can get. They were
Right.
depending on one another and the other guy's rifle to stay alive.
Right. There's this great website. It's called The Art of Manliness, and it sounds like it would be super machismo, but it's really not. What this guy is trying to do is just reclaim a little bit of what prior generations had sort of intuitively
Oh, yeah.
when it comes to being a man. And in one of his blog posts, he posted all of these pictures of groups of men from days gone by, and they were the sort of toughest, most rough and tumble kind of men you would ever want to meet, lumberjacks and soldiers and airplane mechanics. And he posts these pictures of them taking pictures together with one another, and they're always touching in a way that today we would define as homosexual.
Oh, yeah.
And his point was literally to say, listen, it's unnatural for us to think of male friendship in light of homosexuality.
Yes, it doesn't fit.
And here's the pictorial illustration of that.
Right.
And I thought it was beautiful. And there's a certain amount of objection that's going on to this idea of the bromance and all male friendships have to be homosexual, even from the secular world.
Yeah.
I think
great loss. If we bite on that one, it's a great loss.
Yeah.
Right.
I just went last Sunday, after church, my wife and I went to Brooks, Oregon, to an event called the Great Oregon Steam Up. It's all tractors. It was fabulous. First thing I did when we moved back to Oregon was buy myself a tractor. So I'm a tractor owner. So I went over to that tractor show.
Well, you've got the property for it, too.
Yeah, I got the property for it. So we went over to that show, and here were all these guys. I mean, it was rural Oregon to the maximum.
Yep.
All these guys in cork boots and overalls with the leg of the overall cut about 12 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, and there was absolutely, it was just full of intimacy, you know, and joy, and you know, this incredible kind of sophistication about these machines. But there was nothing, you know, possessive about it. It was all
right,
you know, freeing.
Yep.
It was great. He kept coming with a 14-horse steam tractor, blowing its whistle and puffing down the road. Gee, that was fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think my friend Dr. Mallinson would say that your comments about marriage are utterly appropriate and needed in this time because we've lost that type of intimacy too.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever it is about our culture, we've hypersexualized everything to a degree that's harmful in both sides of the relationship.
Yeah, and it can't carry it.
And it can't carry it.
The weight
It's an
is
idol.
too much. Yeah.
It's an idol.
The weight is enough to break it.
Right.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
When we were living in Toronto, when I was doing my graduate work, there was an article in the Globe and Mail about the new celibacy. And I thought, what the heck is this? And I read it with considerable interest. There was no distinction in the new celibacy between satiation and disgust and celibacy. It was people who had tried absolutely everything and the mystery was gone and they were tired of it, sick of it.
Oh, wow.
Tragic.
It was just
Tragic.
Oh, I could hardly stand it. I mean, you know,
tragic.
yeah, self-absorption taken to its limit.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Doesn't work.
No.
Like you say, Rod, it won't bear the weight of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're going to wrap up a little bit here. I want to say, just as we end, to have you guys in at the same table to talk to.
Great to see you.
Incredibly blessed. My two friends, my two mentors, my two dads.
Glad to be that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really fun.
Incredible.
Well, just thrilled about the work you're doing.
Yep.
Well, thank you.
It's
Thank
fabulous.
you. And we're here at the end. We didn't say it ahead of time. We're here at the North American Lutheran Church, right?
Yep.
I got that right. Conference in Anaheim, California, with really a bunch of faithful pastors who came out of the ELCA in its moment of
we have found life after death.
right. getting together, and I think having conferences and still trying to figure things out a couple years later,
Yeah.
and just
It's great.
yeah.
No, we're rejoicing in our liberty.
All right,
That's good.
Wonderful.
absolutely.
All right. Well, if we're going to wrap up here, I'd like just to remind everybody that you can visit www.thinkingfellows.com to catch the show notes, contact us, rate the show, anything you'd like. So please feel free to visit us there, and we'll catch you next time.